Well, hello everyone. Good evening. My name is Victoria Leastman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an organizer with the Sierra Club, and I'm also the field coordinator for the Power Past Fracked Gas Coalition. I'm really excited to have you all on with us tonight for the last event in the series, Taking Our Power Back, Solutions for a Healthy, Clean Future. Is the name of our topic for this last one. And I just wanted to start by going over a few quick logistics. So you'll see people are introducing themselves in the chat. If you don't know how to do that, there's a button at the bottom of your screen where you'll be able to access a button that looks like a chat. If we go to the next slide, folks will be able to see how to do that. And we're also recording tonight, so feel free to turn off your video if that's something that you're not comfortable doing. And also to be respectful of those who are speaking, please go ahead and mute yourself when you aren't speaking. So we have a really great program lined up for us tonight. But I first wanted to just ground us with a land acknowledgement. We are all guests here. Those of us who are settlers, we honor and are grateful to the Indigenous communities who are hosting us, oftentimes on unceded land. And so I myself am on Coast Salish, Duwamish land in so-called Seattle. And feel free, if you haven't introduced yourself yet, or if you'd like to chime in again in the chat to also name whose lands you're currently occupying. And we acknowledge that that just saying so doesn't always undo the past, and that's why taking action is also important, and doing this honoring. So yeah, okay, so I am excited to have you all. This is a little bit, if you need instructions on how to introduce yourself, you can go ahead and see that. Hopefully that's clear for you on the screen. Okay, and so this, like I mentioned, is the last event in our amazing series, Taking Our Power Back, about Puget Sound Energy and how they're a bad actor. PSE, as a reminder, is the state's largest energy utility. They provide services to almost 2 million homes in Washington. And they spend more money on lobbying and campaign contributions annually than Amazon. They play a large role in pro-fossil fuel ad campaigns, and have a huge amount of power in determining whether the state succeeds in transitioning to clean energy. And so we have a really powerful movement in Washington holding this utility accountable. And what is really exciting is that we know that organizing works, right? PSE feels the heat. They respond to public pressure because they have so many customers. And so this is an exciting opportunity for us to continue to turn up the heat and force them into the change that we want to see for a cleaner Washington. And so big thanks to all of the folks who have been part of the series thus far. Would have just seen a screen with all the co-hosts who have been involved in the prior 5 events. No worries if you haven't been able to join us on any of the other ones, because they've all been recorded, and you'll be sent out a kit with all the resources for that if you wanted to go back and watch about any of the other topics. And that resource kit was just dropped in the chat as well too. So what we're focusing on tonight is taking action about these topics that have come up previously, and incorporating all of these things to our fight for climate justice. And so I'm excited to give you all a host of ways to be able to plug into our work. And we have some wonderful people on this evening to give you some more information about how you can roll up your sleeves and take some action with all of us. So that being said, we are going to start off tonight with some grounding, right? Like our movement isn't just about PSE, and it's not strictly about changing where our energy comes from. We know that our fight for the climate isn't going to give us the results we want if we're not also grounded in justice, right? The fight for climate justice is the fight that we need to be fighting because um, the link between climate injustice and racial injustice is a really strong one that we need to be centering. So I am really excited and honored tonight that we have on a really wonderful guest, Les Pogue Jr., who is an environmentalist, social justice and food sovereignty volunteer, father, son, brother, and lover of Mother Earth. A Black man caught in the multi-generational struggle between the construct of whiteness and the mental illness of white supremacy in America. Les currently lives on the ancestral lands of the Puyallup people known today as Tacoma, and is a native of Northern California with pioneer roots in Marysville, California since the early 1800s, and proud descendant of American slavery. Les, if you're ready, I will pass it over to you.
I am currently unmuted.
There you go. Yay. I can hear
Okay.
you.
Good evening, folks. So I'm just going to get right into it. Links between climate justice and racial justice. That term is contradictory in the sense, especially in this country. I'm talking about racial justice. The pseudoscience of color-coded race theory has led us to so much injustice amongst us that contradiction is one link between these two phrases. Everywhere there is fossil fuels production, you see these populations of people of color and the capitalism that supports legislation, litigation, and the degradation of these communities. We have to develop opportunities to have discussions about how race affects participation in every aspect of our American society. The person that is of color in every situation has to have this discussion with self or others of their culture before and during participation in societal situations at every moment. White folks need to be aware of this and do the work of alleviating that burden. One suggestion of actions to take that using your privileges can assist in is breaking down the construct of whiteness that supports the systems of oppression that has Black and brown folks busy surviving the violence and brutality of capitalism. That system of capitalism that finances the mental illness of white supremacy, which in turn relies on extractive earth raping practices needed to feed the bloodlust of the fossil fuels industry, military industrial complex, prison industry, and space forces. Shit is crazy. I've found that in these COVID times, when speaking of the mental illness of white supremacy for the protection of the construct of whiteness, some folks take offense, especially those that consider themselves white. I would ask you to speak on those thoughts. I have this thing. So my father is Ethiopian, French, and Cherokee Choctaw. My mother is Spanish Irish of British descent. That conversation to me delves into our humanity. So when we're making these exchanges and talking about race, we have to do with the race thing. Right? You know, there's one race, it's the human race. And until we, you know, alleviate our humanity of the burden of that, you know, the capitalistic financing of that, the whiteness, you know, I ask that folks get back to, you know, their Irish culture or Italian culture, and let's have that conversation as opposed to, you know, the brutality that comes from that color coded race theory. So I pose that question, you know, what do you feel, and how can you take that rage or that acceptance of um, what I'm saying and put it towards communicating with folks of color um, in this effort to, you know, relieve our earth of these practices, you know, LNG and fossil fuels, you know, what PSC is doing. Um, and I will leave it at that at this point and accept responses. Question
Thank you,
in the
Les.
chat? Yes.
Yeah, do folks, if folks want to type any responses or questions for Les out in the chat, and you can respond. Thank you for that. I think the most, yeah, so much of that resonates with me, Les. I feel really lucky to be connected to my mom's family is Italian American. And I grew up on Sundays with like big tables and lots of food, and um, it makes me, I've reflected a lot on why that is a place of comfort for me, and just like connecting back to where we're from too, right? Like that's also really important for those of folks who maybe were on some of our the webinar last week about Indigenous sovereignty and pipeline politics, about knowing where we're from and knowing where this land is from, and that can ground us very much.
Indeed. You know, and sometimes that brings a comfort in communication, you know, sharing food. Like we're getting ready to go into the growing season. You know, it's those are times where we can have these you know, we can be that close to where we're doing this work, we're in community, we're just having conversations, and we can say, hey, when I was a kid, you know, we learned this tradition, you know, this is what we grow, this is what we eat, you know, and then you can have the conversations about these things in our society, you know, with an introduction of the sharing of that culture, you know, because at one time Italians were dogs, you know. Like if we look back, you know, 80 years ago, 70 years ago.
Totally. I mean, and then there's that whole history of, I mean, I'm from the East Coast in New York, and the whole history of like when whiteness was earned, right? And like seeing how specifically Italians and even some Irish folks were prioritized in the GI Bill, right? Where they were given resources to go and settle, and that wasn't the same treatment that Black Americans who were veterans were receiving, and that's part of a long history of where that type of thing happened repeatedly.
Yes, definitely. And
So,
are there any other comments?
Yes. My family came into the country probably little turn of the 20th century, left Ireland because the British had taken over and pretty much raped the land. There was no food, there was a famine. The eldest son had to leave, and he wound up in Brooklyn, New York, and the family settled there. And I found it so interesting. Being in New York, it was obvious that the most recent immigrants coming in took the most difficult jobs and generally would work their way through it if you were white. I noticed that as a difference. And in any event, I had an opportunity a number of years to go back to Ireland and see family members and see people that look like me. And actually, I kind of felt like this was my tribe. We understood one another, and it was clear right from the start. So that's that story. The end.
Did you have a question, or is that how you you felt from the original statement? And how does that story associate with what we're dealing with now, the whiteness aspect of it? Like, how did your family benefit, when you're the person that came here from Ireland originally, when he got here, did he were they aware of the, you know, what was going on with indigenous folks and, you know, and
No.
enslaved Africans? Because that's the thing. We want to have this exchange of cultures, and in association with the brutality that's going on in these times, we have it's when we're telling a story, it's a lot of trauma that goes with it. And it's hard to tell these stories. It's hard to get into these conversations, and that's what I want to get at. I want to get at, we can't keep gold gilding all of these stories. There's a lot of just devastating things that have gone on. And in that exchange of those conversations about culture, it- you know, how are we tying that to what's going on in this movement? How are we, when we go to all these actions, when we go to talk to the Department of Ecology, how many folks of color do you see present? And why is that? Why is that? One of the reasons I can tell you is because of all that brutality, that history of trauma. We're still dealing with trauma. Like, we are the I would say, I would put $5 bet on the folks, anybody in this chat right now, that people of color are the most conservative environmentally as anyone, because they're put in a situation where they have to be efficient with power. Most of the folks in the world live with, no running water. So it's like that small percentage of our humanity that's, using all of this consumption, and having NFL football teams that, invest in energy grids and just make billions of freaking dollars when the snow hits Texas. Like, that's white supremacy. That Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, that is white supremacy. You know, everything that is financed by that, we partake in it, we support it. You know, now they're going to promote LNG even more than ever, and we're forced to use it until we say, no, enough is enough. Like, we can't do this anymore. Like, so that association with racial justice and climate justice, I don't like to say racial justice, because we continue the whole race thing. We continue it until we've learned our cultures, our ethnicities, our indigeneity to this earth. We will keep being, fooled. It's a farce. The fallacy is like, they made some stuff up, they developed the systems around it, and the systems still work. We saw the most evident display of white supremacy with the last president. And it's, if you did not wake up to it, then there's no longer any. I can't believe this is happening. This has been happening. It's ridiculous. So I appreciate what you shared about your family coming from Ireland. My mother's Irish, and Spanish Irish, Black Irish. And, we can have these conversations, but we have to expect to be real. And I know one thing about being in the Northwest is a very passive aggressive place. And as I've spoken at lots of these actions, I notice that when it gets deep, when it gets hard, gets to those things you really got to think about, lots of people fade out. They start meandering off, and then they go, okay, I don't know, this is a little too much, but the too much is what we need.
Uh, uh, so may I speak? Or I don't know, did I put a hand up?
You're speaking.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm going to put my 2 cents in. I'm also East Coast Italian. My people were brought over to pick tomatoes for hunts. So yeah, Italians were like now Mexicans are now. But and then 2 of my great uncles became cowboy fake Indians in the movies because they were gypsies, which is why Mussolini didn't want them in Italy, but then they got a job being fake Indians. So there's little crossovers there. But the fact is, it is manufactured through like white and black. Nobody is like, if you go 8 generations back with anybody, somebody is mixed something. And it's manufactured for capitalistic reasons, for colonialism, where the concept that people can own earth and that we're not part of nature. We're all like, we are living nature expressing itself. And there's something really sick and wrong when you get to the materialism of just building capital for capital's sake, when a forest is only, you know, like deemed worthy in timber feet, you know, and it's giving life to the whole planet. It's like the respiratory system of the planet. There's a big disconnect and there's a big sickness there. And it is carried on the backs of the more indigenous people, and the slavery has never gone away. The 17th Amendment, I mean, prisoners, now everybody is like parceled out by capitalism as a profit center. So even if you go to prison, you're making money for somebody else. If you're an essential worker, you know, like nothing would fly without the essential workers. And yet the people that are making the money on the essential workers have no exposure to risk. You know, so the divide and conquer is definitely set up by capitalism to say, okay, these people are inferior, these people are not worth anything, these people, you know, like, and different groups are pitted against each other for the cause of capitalism and for the cause of accumulation of wealth. And you know, corporations have rights to extract wealth, to own water, which everybody should own, and make a profit on owning things that are, you know, part of the birthright of every human being. But then nature is not given rights, and nature needs to also have rights to exist, because nature is regenerative and it sustains all of us. And when you put all the refineries in all, you know, the poorest neighborhoods, when you like put the tar sands right out in the reservations, when you like put the pipelines through the people that don't have the legal resources to, you know, fight against it, that's just pure evil. And it is not enhancing the nature of, you know, we're all indigenous to this planet. There's no planet B. And I'm really rambling now because I'm tired today. But but I feel what you're saying, and yeah.
Thank you, Alice. You know, I really appreciate this technology because somehow my screen is not showing the people that are talking, but I have to toggle through with the dots and find the person that's talking. And I can see that, you know, you put some thought. You started out a little nervous, but as you got deeper into it, you really like, this is something that's inside of you. Like, that's what we need more of that. We need more, you know, of the uncomfortableness, the, you know, whatever. Let the fragility break, you know, stop being so damn fragile, you know, like people are suffering. Lots of people are like taking a lot of shit for this, you know, getting shot in the back in the streets, you know, like, you know, it's just the level of insanity that it goes on to support this wickedness is just at an all-time high right now. And people got to get like that. Like, um, you spoke about, like, you got into a little bit of indigeneity and the planet as a being, you know, and how capitalism, colonialism, you know, has just made it an asset or a commodity, you know, and and people, those indigenous people in the Amazon and all over the world have been telling us for decades, but we go buy bottled water. You know, we go do the things that are the opposite of what we really need right now because we're being led by this fallacy. And until that fallacy is broken down, we will continue this. So it's you know, the relation between the climate justice and the human justice or the human race justice, racial justice. I have to say it now because we haven't advanced enough in our vocabulary and our mentality to not speak in that way in this country. And we have to keep doing it, but I'm tired of it's too brutal to be black. I don't want to be black anymore, really. If you really look at it, every day I hear the news, some other person's being shot down, some, you know, oil leak somewhere, some crazy ass shit is going on. Right here in Tacoma, cops are running people over in the streets. Like, come on, y'all. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Les. Um, yeah, I'm wondering if you've any other thoughts um, before we start threading these connections for people into more action.
I just my before you go into the actions in the breakout rooms, you know, think of it in that lens. Think of it as the person that is the one that's living next to the oil refinery, the one that's in Flint, Michigan, drinking the lead inundated water. Think of it from that position and think of it how hard it would be to be involved in the climate, you know, actions in the climate justice field, you know, because there's that variance. It's like, okay, there's so much work here in social justice and there's so much work in climate justice, and we want to see more people of color in climate justice, and people doing social justice want more white folks to be in there like getting busted upside the head. So it's like we have to like figure out this communication and how can we get that whole racial lens out of the way, and how can your whiteness be broken down to assist in forwarding our humanity? Can you be Irish again, or Italian, or, you know, Spanish or whatever, German? It's
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Les. I think also the thing that I've internalized, a colleague of mine wrote this piece, and some of y'all may have heard it before. he said that you can't have climate change without sacrifice zones, right? Places where you pollute, where people are suffering, and you can't have those sacrifice zones without disposable people, and you can't have people who are considered disposable without racism. And that's
right.
why it's all connected, and the more we can all rise to Les's call here to think about undoing our own biases, the better we're going to be able to succeed in getting to the shared future that we all are visioning for.
I have a question. And I know,
do you mind, we're gonna keep going, but we're
yes.
gonna have a Q&A section at the very end. Is
Yep.
that okay?
Yep, thank you.
Chat. Okay. If folks want to drop appreciation for Les or any other reflections that they have in the chat, please do that. And then we're gonna come back to questions and answers after we go to breakout rooms. All right. So, people want to take a breath. Keep all of this at the front of your heart right now and mind. And Shimona, if you could put the slides back up for us, I'm going to pass it over to the folks who are running breakout rooms. So, Neil, do you want to give us an overview of what this campaign is and how it connects, to our past conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. As Les was saying, these projects are usually sited in regions that affect these populations that have already been disadvantaged. And we see that across the country, but we see that in Washington too. We've had a whole slew of projects that have targeted these communities over the past 10 years. And we've been able to fight them off, but it's taken a lot of effort and a lot of time. And so we have an opportunity now to stop them from happening at all, from even being allowed to be proposed. There is a set of new rules being considered by the Department of Ecology. And if they set those right, then these projects, the fossil fuel industry, won't be able to come here into Washington at all to even start these projects. So in this group, we'll talk about how you can get involved in this, and how you can add your voice to make sure that ecology does the right thing, and so that we can keep these projects out altogether.
Sorry, y'all, had my mute button on. Thanks, Neil. Okay, Don, do you want to chime in about what's going to be going on in your breakout room?
Sure. So we are on the eve of the comment period, or the comment hearing for PSE's Integrated Resource Plan. So this is a plan that's basically what PSE is going to do for the next 20 to 24 years. It's a great plan. And so we need comments from the public to express their concerns about this. And this is, I would say, this is the people on this call are pretty much the cream of the crop for making these comments, because even if you're not quite sure what's in the Integrated Resource Plan, or even what it is, your experiences and your passions that even the things that we we're just talking about, the racial inequities that are inherent in some of PSE's planning. This is the place where you can make those comments in a forum which will affect our future. And in fact, this particular feedback session on this Integrated Resource Plan is the most important one that we've had probably ever. So these Integrated Resource Plans, they have been coming out every 2 years. This one is, they're changing that, and it's going to be every 4 years. But this particular plan is going to form the foundation for what PSE puts into their Clean Energy Implementation Plan. And that's basically how are they going to meet the requirements of Washington's new Clean Energy Transformation Act, known as CETA. And so this really establishes the floor for, you know, what goes on from here on out. So we are not happy that they are still planning.
Oh no, John, you went on mute.
That was weird. Okay, it said the host muted me. I go, oh, did I say something bad? Okay, let's see. So one thing that we're not happy about this integrated resource plan is that PSE is planning to build a new gas plant that really is not necessary if you're doing the proper investment in solar and wind and energy storage. So these are, and demand response. Demand response is something where PSE actually pays people to reduce electricity use at critical times. And this is done across the country. PSE just hasn't been doing any of it, and they're not planning to do very much of it in this integrated resource plan. So anyway, that's a lot of detail, but I will be discussing, answering questions and discussing some of the things that people can say that would be really helpful in this comment period. You can do it orally tomorrow. The meeting goes from—
John, I just want to be aware of time. Maybe you can go into some more of these details in your breakout room.
Yes, that sounds good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the overview. Cool.
Okay.
Okay, Ruth, you're up next. What's going on in your room?
Yeah, so in my room, we're going to be talking about keeping families connected to power, or keeping people, I should say. Last year, we were able to make sure that no families in Washington were had their lights shut off, had their power shut off, which I think we've all been reminded this past week just has devastating consequences. And we're trying to make the protections that we've won permanent. So in my room, we're going to talk about what we did last year, what we're going to keep doing to keep people connected to essential utilities. And we will also take action together. We're going to be doing some social media posting towards winning our next thing. And just to connect this to our broader theme, at the bottom there, you can see in regard to specifically Puget Sound Energy, they're really awful at providing energy assistance to low-income families. Only 33% of the customers surveyed in a recent survey that qualified for assistance received any. So we have a really broken system, and we're trying to take action to keep power affordable and clean and accessible to everybody.
Thanks, Ruth. Okay, and Eleanor, how about you?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for all being here tonight. My room is going to talk about some of the solutions to getting off gas through building electrification and phasing out gas in all sectors of the economy. A lot of us have learned about electrification, the electricity sector, the utility sector and transportation, but the state legislature is also considering action now to get gas out of buildings. So I'm going to go over some of those legislative proposals and talk about how they're going to reduce emissions and get us off gas. There's also a couple local actions happening across the state that I'll update you on as well.
Great, thank you, Eleanor. And lastly, Stacy. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Barbara.
Yes. Hi, I'm Barbara Chevalier. Room 5 is going to be talking about a public utility district campaign for removing northeastern King County from PSE's electrical service. And so we would establish our own public utility district to serve electricity. PSD has some of the dirtiest, most expensive electricity in the state, and we would really like to change that and to make it more affordable and really to design a utility that serves people rather than profits. So anybody, even if you don't live in the proposed PUD area, is welcome to join our campaign. If you're not able to make it to the breakout room, I encourage you to check out our website at ekc-pud.org. And you can contact the campaign directly as well at info@ekc-pud.org, or you can join our breakout room and we'll talk more.
Okay, and now lastly, Stacy.
Stacy Oaks, I, she, her pronouns. And in room number 6, again, one of the other ways that we could take back our power from PSE, there are some things we can do around personal choices. Again, this is not to advocate that that personal choices are going to be the way that we can kind of get things done for climate, because we know that, you know, it's the 1% that really has the biggest impact if they were to change personal choices. And we know that, you know, there's only like 100 companies that are making like 75% of the world's emissions. So in this group, though, this is just going to provide a space where if folks have questions or want to talk about ways that they can do personal choices. If you're a person that has that kind of capacity to be looking at what could you be doing in your personal life, there's you know, some things that you can be doing. Potentially you can be getting gas out of your home, which is also, you know, a safety and health thing for your family. You can be lowering the amount of energy you use in your home with different tactics. But another kind of personal change type stuff isn't just changing things in our home, but it's changing the way we interact with the world and with each other. So that could also be talking about how do you invest more time in educating others, whether that is your friend group, your faith group, your colleagues at work, people that you're in, you know, Facebook groups with that you see posting things that maybe aren't true. So how do you get kind of more invested in sharing what you have put in the time to learn in spaces like these? Also supporting legislation and initiatives like the public power and fossil-free buildings. You know, how do you kind of find the time to do that in your life? Also just trying to call out industry misinformation when you see it. You know, recently King County was successful in getting ads off of buses because people called it out. So the power of kind of calling people on their BS from these industry standpoints actually can make kind of a big difference in different ways. And then, of course, another thing that you can do is you can continue to educate yourself about systemic oppression. If you're someone that is uncomfortable with discussions about race or privilege, to lean into that and find ways to kind of practice and get your stamina up. So we're going to be chatting about anything. So it's kind of a little bit of an open discussion for folks that want to talk about how to be able to do some of those things.
Thank you, Stacy. Okay, y'all. So now is the time you're going to select which group you would like to be in. And so these are your options again. And what you're going to do is rename yourself. So we're going to go to the next slide, and that will give you instructions on how to rename yourself to indicate which room you want to be in. If for some reason you can't do that, you're going to write in the chat what room you want to be in. So here they are again, right? So you should be able to find the button on top of your screen. It should have 3 dotted lines, and then hit rename, and then put the number of the room you want to be in front of your name. So I'm going to go ahead and rename myself so that I have room 1. I'm going to go with Neil. And then that way we can get started into our breakout rooms. Easy. So everyone go ahead and do that. And we're going to get moving into rooms in just a few minutes here. So everyone sit tight while our tech people work their magic. And we should be in breakout rooms until about 7:05. So we're going to be heading in there in just a few minutes. So sit tight and we'll get going soon.
Cool. So this is the tech person doing breakout rooms. The way I've set it up, you can also choose the room that you want to be in, And then if for those of the people who have trouble with that, so we'll do both. So you can put your number or you can choose, and I'm going to open the breakout rooms now to make that happen a little bit faster.
That's amazing, Shimona. Thank you. I hope folks were able to have some good, robust conversations as well. So at this point, we are gonna take some general questions and answers from folks. So feel free to either to drop questions in the chat. If that's not accessible to you, you can come off of mute. But yeah, so for anyone who you can ask general questions about anything that came up tonight at this time.
There was a great question that came up right at the end of our room about, is there a possibility of making House Bill 1084 an initiative instead of trying to depend on the legislature to do what's right?
That sounds like it might be a question for Eleanor. Okay.
Yeah, I just responded to Bill privately. That is not something I've heard of yet, but of course, you know, I have to, I think that's a great idea. I think that's something we're thinking about, but it's not something that I've heard about any prior plans towards yet.
Other questions? I'm not seeing much. Some people asking for links in the chats. How do we link to the 20-year plan on Friday? We can drop some information about that.
I think I've heard a ballpark figure for running an initiative is you better have $1 million.
That sounded like a comment. Do you have a question? Any questions? Thanks, Rich. It does take money to run campaigns. Wow, do people have all the answers? That's amazing.
No, I'm gonna ask a question. Can I ask a question?
Please.
Oh, what are some of the things, like in our group we talked about, Stacy had shared when cooking with the gas cooktop, you know, to use the back burner to, you know, help the hood fan alleviate the toxicity in the room, and try to use a heat plate or electric, you know, water boiler for your tea. What are things that people are doing to be aware and have that consciousness about how we use these things and how we wean ourselves from them? You know, I would like to ask that question for the group, all y'all.
And for me, with making changes, it's just about kind of taking baby steps, right? Like sometimes I'll pick one thing to try and start doing differently, and I'll focus on that for a week or until I feel like I can do it without it being a focus, and then maybe pop something else in and just kind of start making slowly changes. And that's I guess the way that I started incorporating. I really had a goal of getting single-use items like kind of out of something that I bring into my house, right? So instead of like, oh my gosh, I'm getting rid of it all, I was like, I'm going to stop buying Kleenex and I'm going to cut up, you know, some nice cloth tissues and reuse those and wash those. So I did that one step. And then I'm like, okay, now what do I do for paper towels? And then dealt with that and then dealt with another thing. So sometimes, like, if you can break something down, if you're trying to change a lot of stuff, I think into some baby steps and just do one part of it at a time, it makes it seem more attainable. What do other people think?
I can say something. I think partly because I grew up poor, then we knew how to conserve because we had to. And so even today I do that. You know, I don't waste food. We eat our leftovers. We don't throw them out. We make soup out of whatever's left, or we mix it into a salad. This sweater is really good wool sweater. It keeps me warm. And if the house on these moist days, even when your temperature's a good solid temperature, you feel cold. So I just wear vests. So I, instead of raising the heat, I add clothes. And it just, you know, there are just a lot of things that were gifts to me from growing up, which I didn't like at the time, but they're it's good advice today.
Which is, I think, another reason why it's all the more important for us to listen to the voices of frontline folks, right? Because like you're gonna have all kinds of wisdom that people that didn't struggle aren't holding, and don't already know to be true, or don't already have ideas of how to implement things in ways that they work. And so it's just another really practical reason to make sure that we're listening to people that are struggling the most, I think.
I just still pop a little word. I've found it helpful to just always be thinking of how I can reuse something, because when you go to buy anything, we're so used to everything being prepackaged, processed, so such convenience packaging. And what is it that I can reuse for something instead of going out and buying a container, or just remaking something, repurposing something, and doing, of course, as much recycling and composting as possible.
Another thing that came up in our group was, with this reliance on the gas, how do we conform an effort, or we need to conform an effort to alleviate the financial strain of folks that are low income, that are living below that minimum wage scale, and either if they need conversions on their homes, elderly folks as well, or just people that are struggling, how do they make that conversion, and how do they get that information? We all have these devices and, things like that. So how can we make a good effort to put this out here on a more broader basis to the folks that aren't in that 25% of our population? Because that's the majority of us, people that don't have college degrees, people that are, struggling in the street. There's not a lot of people that are really super making it, so we need that. We need those voices heard. And how do we make a campaign to, put on the city or the county to start providing some kind of incentive and some kind of breaks for folks that need to make those conversions,
Yeah. Does anyone have a response, a comment to that, or any other? I see, maybe I think we have time for one more question. I'm seeing Lynn, you have a hand up.
Yeah, it's just in response to that question. One small way to get the word out would be to involve teachers, because I'll tell you as a parent that kids take home information and they demand action by their parents. So they can become the purveyors of all of these resources.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really excellent point, Lynn. Let our youth have some spaciousness in our work, and learn from them. All right, y'all. Well, thank you all for this time to ask questions. I also want to remind folks before we wrap up tonight, we didn't have a breakout room on it, but it came up, at least in the room that I was in, quite a bit, that the Tacoma LNG facility is coming to a precipice. This is the 8 million gallon liquefied natural gas, frac gas tank that is being built on Puyallup land without their consent in Tacoma. And so, speaking of environmental injustice and racism, this is a very, very pertinent example that's been at the forefront of this series. So I wanted to raise that again. There's a legal hearing happening on that in April, and it was just dropped in the chat. There are some things that folks can be doing to stand with the Puyallup against that facility. So there's a toolkit and there's a writing guide. Letters to the editor are particularly important right now. So just wanted to close y'all out with one last plug in case you didn't get enough to do tonight. That is extra important. On that note, y'all, I'm wondering if folks can close us out by dropping something in the chat that they learned over the series or this evening in particular on how you know this webinar, this experience has helped you to feel more empowered against the might of PSE, because we're a David and Goliath story here, and any inspiration that we can all share is really helpful.
Pardon me, Victoria?
Yeah.
Is there a little time for me to address the question from Brad Barton to everyone from room 4?
Why don't you go for it?
He asked, how do we go beyond race in Les's wisdom? And what I spoke about earlier is, there is one race, it's the human race. So when we look at breaking down the construct of whiteness, it takes us away from that color-coded race theory. So there's not, the black race, the Caucasoids, these things that were derived from, a need to rule, so it's we have to stop speaking it. We have to stop, racist. We're all racist in this society. We are, because we speak it, because we speak in that way. We have to fill out applications that ask for your race. My grandfather, when I found his, the brother Kwo shared with me this, found his, I'm pretty sure it was a census card from 1918. And when it asked for race on that, he put African. And that was in 1918. He was 24 years old. So this whole race construct, it's been going for quite a long time, couple 300, actually it's 500 to 600 years old, the whiteness thing, if you look at it like that. So how do we go beyond race? We just leap ahead. We stop, supporting the ignorance that's behind race, because that race gives people a reason to denigrate people, to desecrate lands, to do all this damage, so that is my response to that question. And thank you for the opportunity to, shed a little light.
Yeah.
Excuse me, if I may, I just wanted to say, and I'm sorry I came a little late to this. I don't know if this was talked about previously, but based on some of the questions that have come up, there's the Washington State Climate Assembly on their website. They have put out recently the recommendations that were made to the assembly, and they are requesting public comments on those recommendations.
Can I ask you, Scott, did you hear what I said before you posed what you just did? And
yeah,
announced that we were about to end it. So that's your response to it?
No, that wasn't my response to what you said. I totally agree with what you said, and there's no scientific basis for races. So I totally agree with what you said. No, I knew we were about to end, so I was just jumping in to provide that information because I thought there wouldn't be another chance to do something.
Do you see a conscience that you could have about that? That you could have stepped back and not asked that question and put it in the chat because I'd shared something real deep with you?
I get what you're saying, Lester. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
That's what we have to start thinking about. That's what you have to start thinking about. How do you not continue to get the center stage or upstage? How do you do that? How do you humble yourself for others to shine? That's the work.
Got it.
That's the work.
Yeah.
I did recommend if people are looking for ways to work through, if white folks in particular, I should say, are looking for ways to work through their bias. The work I recommend the workbook White Supremacy and Me. It has a lot of journaling prompts, ask some of these hard questions and for continued reflection. So that's in the chat as well. I want to thank you so much, Les, for joining us tonight. For all the folks who helped run breakout rooms, for the folks who have been on this series this whole time and helped organize this. And I hope folks are taking some good things away this evening to reflect on and to take action and to continue our shared work together, right, for justice. So I really thank you all for joining, and we'll send out follow-up information to everyone. So y'all have a good night. Take good care.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everybody. If you're somebody that doesn't know how to save the chat, but you'd really like to, if you go to the chat and there should be potentially 3 little dots, you can click on that and then save chat, and it'll save to your computer with all of those links. But if not, we'll try to get as many of those to you as possible in those follow-up notes.
Thanks for the series, Stacy. Good job.
Thank you all for all your work. This has been, the whole series has been good. I've seen 3 of them and it's great. It's very inspiring. This is the work. I really appreciate y'all. Peace, love, and liberation.
Thank you. Thanks for being a part of it, Les.
Thank you all. Thank you, Les.
The work is in the streets.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to telling me how to save those links.
Oh, you're welcome.
Have a good week.
Thanks, Poco.
Thanks. I don't even know how I ended up in here, but I appreciate it.
Hey, glad to have you.
I saved the chat, so we're good.
Thanks, Leslie. All right. I think we can go ahead and end it out then. Thanks, everybody, so much.